The world waits this Tuesday night for the U.S. president's tariff plan.
Whatever they charge us, we charge them, but we're being nicer than they were.
As some U.S. senators push back.
Canada is our friend, not our adversary.
On the campaign trail, two parties lose three candidates. Why they're no longer in the running. The consumer carbon tax evaporates. The effect on your wallet, the environment, and farmers.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The day before the American president's expected announcement of sweeping tariffs on goods imported to the U.S., countries around the world are trying to anticipate what's coming. The White House press secretary said today Donald Trump's team is still perfecting the final details. Trump claims his plan will be the start of a rebirth of America. What it will almost certainly trigger is an escalating trade war. Some American senators in border states with Canada are standing up for Canada today, but uncertainty prevails. Jackson Proskow begins our coverage tonight.
On the eve of Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day, the White House still can't offer any details about the tariffs the president is preparing to impose, only that they will be effective immediately.
April 2nd, 2025 will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history.
Trump has repeatedly vowed blanket reciprocal tariffs on countries around the world.
Whatever they charge us, we charge them, but we're being nicer than they were.
That's on top of the automotive tariffs set to come into effect this week. Canada, China, Mexico, and the EU will likely bear the brunt of it.
We do not necessarily want to retaliate, but if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate, and we will use it.
In Washington, there is a sense Trump's plans are still very much in flux, keeping markets shaky as pushback grows within the halls of Congress.
What we need is an Article 1 branch that is willing to stand up and say Canada is our friend, not our adversary. Trade with Canada is important.
Ahead of blanket tariffs, Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine has brought forward legislation to undo Trump's tariffs on Canada. He has several Republicans on his side.
I'm hearing from my constituents and everybody else's too that they don't like economic chaos and they don't want to pay more for groceries. They don't want to pay more for building supplies, for fertilizers for their farms, for aluminum and steel to build ships.
Trump has dubbed all of it a plan to make America wealthy again. Yet the White House continues to misrepresent who will ultimately pay the price.
A tariff will be a tax on these foreign nations, these foreign companies.
Once they actually are implemented, though, and Americans start to see major price increases for a host of goods that they regularly purchase, then I think they're going to begin to sour on tariffs.
Notably, Trump's announcement is scheduled for after the markets close on Wednesday, a nod to the further economic disruption these tariffs could cause. Donna?
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. In the face of what's coming from Trump, Canada's Prime Minister is doing double duty, running the country and campaigning as the federal Liberal leader. Today, Mark Carney spoke with Mexico's president about what Carney's office calls Canada's plan to fight unjustified trade actions. Claudia Sheinbaum has said she is hoping a pause in tariffs against Mexico stays in place after tomorrow. And Mark Carney is promising to reject all attempts to weaken Canada. Mackenzie Gray is following the campaign. Mackenzie, what is Carney's message to Canadians?
That retaliation against the Americans is going to come, Donna, but Mark Carney isn't saying what exactly that could look like, waiting until Trump announces the tariffs on Wednesday.
We are going to be very deliberate in terms of the measures we take to fight for Canada, fight against these unjustified measures by the U.S. administration.
Justin Trudeau's government had an additional $125 billion in tariffs ready to go on the U.S. if the Americans followed through, and that would raise prices for many Canadians. No word if Carney will use that list, but he has said he won't negotiate with Trump on Quebec's language laws, something the U.S. officials signaled out today, supply management, and cultural restrictions. Carney is set to fly to Ottawa late Tuesday night in advance of meetings he'll have on Parliament Hill tomorrow, Donna, putting Carney in a role he clearly finds most comfortable. The Prime Minister taking on Donald Trump compared to his other job as Liberal leader, which hasn't gone as smoothly over the past few days.
Mr. Chiang made his resignation, offered his resignation last night. I accepted it.
That resignation of Liberal MP and Markham-Unionville candidate Paul Chiang coming just after midnight Eastern time.
ending a days-long political firestorm.
This was a serious lapse of judgment. It was an error. It was a serious thing to do with serious consequences. And I think that the decision for him to step down was the right one.
It was revealed Chiang proposed turning in a Conservative candidate in a nearby riding to the Chinese consulate in Toronto to claim a bounty put on him by Hong Kong police. On Monday, Carney was willing to back Chiang after he apologized.
I am deeply offended by those comments. As I said, they're a terrible lapse of judgment. I view this as a teachable moment.
That teachable moment phrase struck a chord with Chinese diaspora groups who've been calling on Carney to drop Chiang.
It's really regrettable that Mark Carney did not use this moment to set that example as Prime Minister of Canada to show the world that we're taking this issue of foreign interference and transnational repression very seriously, that we have a zero tolerance approach here in Canada.
We look after our neighbor.
The opposition wanted Carney to fire Chiang instead of him being allowed to quit.
I think with respect to Mark Carney, though, it was clearly a failure of leadership. What his candidate did was egregious.
The final nail in Chiang's political coffin was likely word from the RCMP, Donna, that they're looking into seeing if suggesting collecting a bounty against a political opponent breaks the law.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Winnipeg. Thanks. The Federal Conservative Party dropped 2 of its candidates today. One of them was running in a Montreal riding. He says he was dropped because of some of his posts on social media. Another Tory running in Windsor, Ontario, was removed by the party when comments he made about bringing back public hangings and Justin Trudeau resurfaced. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is with me. Mercedes, take us through the circumstances here.
Donna, now former Conservative candidate Mark McKenzie was musing about bringing back capital punishment on his comedy podcast in 2022. He joked about public hangings, listing notorious killers who he thought deserved that, when he laughed and then threw out Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's name, something he now says he regrets.
I don't stand by that comment. Again, it was a joke. My co-host at the time was very critical of Trudeau. Again, it was during a very controversial time in our country with the lockdowns and everything like that.
Joe Carnot, the Conservative campaign, was done with him. The Conservatives dropped a second candidate late this afternoon. Stéfan Marquis was running in Montreal against incumbent Cabinet Minister Stephen Guilbeault. He tweeted that the Conservatives terminated his candidacy in a 1-minute phone call over his social media posts. We've viewed some of those posts, Donna, from just this month alone. They back negative comments about Canada from right-wing host Tucker Carlson, expressed support for the Trump administration and DOGE cuts, and wade into conspiracy theories. Both dumped candidates had something in common: a low chance of winning and a high political risk to the party going forward. A quick decision for the Conservatives. Parties dropping candidates based off inappropriate comments or bad behavior is common in campaigns. In fact, campaign war rooms have an entire section dedicated to digging up dirt on their competitors with the hopes of getting them knocked out of the race. So there will almost certainly be more candidate controversy in the days ahead. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. The federal Conservative leader was campaigning again today in Atlantic Canada. In the face of Trump's tariffs, Pierre Poilievre has rejected criticism from some Conservatives that he's not pivoting to focus on responding to Canadians' anxieties about a trade war. As Heidi Petrachuk reports, today he was promising to fast-track energy projects.
It wasn't until midnight.
Pierre Poilievre's Atlantic Canada push came to Newfoundland and Labrador, where the Conservative leader leaned into big energy promises.
These demands come from the 14 biggest energy companies in Canada,
pledging to simplify regulations and approve permits for major projects in 6 months.
I also will grant rapid permits for LNG Newfoundland Labrador, which will pipe gas from the Jeanne d'Arc oil field to a floating liquefaction facility.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, as with New Brunswick, oil and gas is a big deal and a big concern under the specter of U.S. tariffs. Poilievre has focused heavily on that here,
Canada's fish harvesters,
while also vowing to double funds for small craft harbors to support fish harvesters. But will it turn into votes?
The Liberals have been the dominant party in this region really since 1993. If you take 2011 out of the mix, when Harper got his majority.
Federal Conservatives have since struggled to gain a foothold on the East Coast, polling this federal election suggesting the Liberals could gain seats.
Atlantic Canadians, I think they worry about social programs and whether or not there be cut to social programs with this Conservative government in power.
As Polyev pulled into Charlottetown for a photo op, Islanders shared their mixed feelings.
I find him a wolf in sheep's clothes, but that's my opinion.
I have a lot of concerns about the types of policies that they would pass and the rights and freedoms of our people that it would limit.
Well, I'm a die-hard conservative, so in the family years ago, so I kind of tend to go that way.
Big rallies like this one in Borden Carlton on PEI make it clear the Conservatives have a very politically active and enthusiastic supporters. But what Polyev really needs is to win over the undecided or convince others to switch. Donna.
All right, Heidi Petracek on Prince Edward Island tonight. Thanks. Most drivers of gas-powered vehicles in Canada should notice a difference when they fill up their tanks today. The federal carbon tax consumers pay is gone. Once a signature policy of the Liberal government, it was intended to drive Canadians toward alternatives to fossil fuels, but it wasn't a political winner, and it was the first thing Mark Carney dropped when he took over as leader. Neetu Garcha looks at what it means for environmental policy and for your wallet.
Prices are dropping at gas stations right across the country.
It's good to just save a few bucks every year, where you can.
With affordability issues at play here, I think it's a positive thing for everyone.
Canadians in the next 48 hours are going to see pump prices dropping rather dramatically.
The federal consumer carbon tax added 17.6 cents per liter to fuel prices. Removing it was one of the first decisions Mark Carney made as Prime Minister, leaving industrial carbon pricing for large-scale polluters in place.
It also means you'll pay, on average, about $300 less a year on your home heating bill.
They're going to hide the tax from the pump for 28 days leading up to the election, in the hopes that people will forgive and forget.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre suggesting Canadians will still pay through an industrial carbon tax trickling down to the consumer.
It doesn't trickle down very much to consumers because we have an output-based pricing system that actually lessens the burden on producers.
Prices in the Maritimes dropped significantly overnight. In New Brunswick, just over 20 cents per litre for gas and nearly 24 cents per litre for diesel. Price drops came slower in BC, where the provincial bill on reversing its own carbon tax wasn't pushed through until 2 a.m., giving gas stations little time to react. Quebec has its own cap-and-trade system, so drivers there won't see the same price relief. The immediate savings come with trade-offs. Canadians will no longer get quarterly rebate checks offsetting the cost of the federal pollution pricing.
It turns out the low-income households are the losers, and the high-income households and those that drive a lot, they are the winners.
It served its purpose. It reduced emissions. It sent a price signal. However, it's become too polarizing.
Climate advocates are pushing for a new way to achieve climate targets that aren't so divisive. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Burnaby, BC.
Farmers have been looking forward to the end of the carbon tax. Coming up, what it means to them during this trade war. Hydro crews in eastern Ontario are preparing for another blast of freezing rain as they work to restore power to about 250,000 customers. The weather conditions in Peterborough helped today, but the past couple of days have been difficult as thick coatings of ice brought down trees and power lines. At the height of the storm, over 800,000 customers were cut off from the electricity grid. Many Canadian farmers are welcoming the end of the consumer carbon tax. While the gasoline and diesel used to fuel tractors and combines have always been exempt from the carbon tax, it has increased costs to farmers in other ways. As Heather Yurix West explains, the savings come at an important time.
And it puts your seed like this.
It's almost seeding time in southern Alberta, but the planning for planting is tricky this year.
Yesterday I made a change on about 600 acres. We decided to switch from malt barley to durum.
Predicting the tumultuous trade market come harvest time is anyone's guess, but there is something to celebrate right now. The sector's hated consumer carbon tax has gone away.
We've never paid on our farm fuel. We paid on our, cars we use to go to town with. We pay on that. But what we do pay it on would be things like freight, railway, They use diesel fuel, they pay carbon tax on that, it gets directly passed down to us.
Industry-wide, it's estimated farmers will save $100 million a year with the consumer carbon tax gone. And that is critical savings as the sector faces tariffs from not only China, but the United States as well.
We've been advocating for this for a long, long time. So it does help. Our gas bill, for our last month for heating our shop, a third of that cost was the carbon tax.
But natural gas savings, also used by farmers to dry grain, can't make up for lost sales if critical trade markets suddenly disappear. Most of Van der Valk's barley is exported to the United States.
That would be a huge financial hit to us in terms of hundreds of thousands of dollars just on my farm. It's actually too scary to even think about, actually. And so we just hope that cool heads prevail.
The end of the carbon tax seen as a saving grace for many farmers sowing through uncertainty. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, near Fort Macleod, Alberta.
A teenager dies in Israeli custody. What it reveals about Palestinians detained without charge. In Myanmar, a woman was rescued 4 days after she was buried in debris after a powerful earthquake. Hopes of finding others alive, though, are fading. There was a moment of silence in Myanmar today to honor the almost 3,000 who are known to have died. There are fears that number will rise in the days ahead. The death of a Palestinian boy who was held in an Israeli prison has exposed what thousands of Palestinians endure. The 17-year-old from the West Bank died last month. He'd been held without charge for 6 months. His family says he was detained for throwing stones at Israeli soldiers. Redmond Shannon reports on what's known about his death and the conditions of others held in Israeli prisons.
Grieving a son. Khalid Ahmed leafs through pictures of Walid as a toddler and recalls how he found out his 17-year-old had died in an Israeli prison.
We were shocked when we heard a 17-year-old boy died in Megiddo prison. Of course we were worried. Then an hour and a half later, we were told it was Walid.
Khalid wants to know how a teen could die in custody, having been held without charge for 6 months for allegedly throwing stones at Israeli soldiers.
In the last court session, I saw on the video that Walid looked weak.
He says his son told him he contracted scabies but was cured, a condition many Palestinian detainees like this released teenager have complained of. Walid's lawyer said his client then contracted the gastro-illness amoebic dysentery. This Palestinian Authority spokesperson says Walid collapsed and hit his head on March 23rd.
Witnesses say the prison administration did not respond to requests to intervene to save his life.
After Walid's death, the Israeli prison service said it was investigating. It did not respond to a Global News request for an update. The Palestinian Authority says Walid is the first detainee under 18 to die in Israeli custody and the 63rd during Israel's war with Hamas. They are among the thousands detained, many indefinitely and without charge. Human rights groups have alleged widespread abuse of Palestinian prisoners long before and after the October 7th Hamas attacks, something Israel denies. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A volcano that's kept southwestern Iceland on edge for months is erupting again. It's near the fishing town of Grindavik and the famous Blue Lagoon Spa. Both were evacuated hours before lava and smoke started spewing. People have mostly kept clear of the area since late 2023 when the volcano came to life after being dormant for about 800 years. Torpedo takeover next. The buzz about these oddly shaped baseball bats. The sport of baseball has evolved a lot over the years. The shape of the baseball bat, though, is one of the few parts of the game that stayed mostly the same. It's why torpedo bats are the talk of the new season. And as Mike Armstrong explains, a Quebec company is part of what could be a batting revolution.
When you pull off something that's never happened in the history of baseball, people notice. Well, the Yankees did that over the weekend, starting a game with 3 home runs on the first 3 pitches. They finished the game with 9. Those results weren't normal, and neither were the bats many of the Yankees were using.
If it helps the hitter, why not?
Olivier Lepin is with B45 Baseball. The Quebec company is one of only 4 making what's come to be known as the torpedo bat. They were approached a couple of years ago by a Yankees analyst, an MIT physicist by training, open to looking at things a different way. B45 was willing to take a chance as well.
It looked kind of awkward the first time you see it.
The bat is basically tailored to a certain sort of player, someone who gets jammed inside by pitches. It means they're less likely to get the sweet spot of the bat on the ball, so the sweet spot is moved in.
There's a lot more cameras here today than I'm used to.
The bat's creator, now with the Miami Marlins, is right now a big deal, but with a debate swirling.
Say what you want, it will be duplicated.
In a game where records matter, some are nervous batters are getting an advantage. But Major League Baseball says the bat doesn't break any rules.
If it's legal and everyone's free to do it, then it ain't a controversy, period.
Now, the torpedo bat is only being used by about 20 players, but the 5 Yankees using it made a big splash.
Now everybody wants to try it.
The orders at B45 are piling up, and they expect other companies to quickly take a swing at making their own version. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Priddis, Alberta, St. Andrews, New Brunswick, and Twillingate, Newfoundland and Labrador. Please keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to Global National at globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.